Hi, I'm Dr. Julie. I'm a board certified psychiatrist, and I happened to be on a live recently where there was a discussion of histrionic personality disorder. And I noticed in the chat of that video, there was a lot of misconceptions about this personality disorder, including that the traits of it are more like willful compared to like borderline personality or antisocial personality disorder. So I thought I would make a video and provide like a bit more information about histrionic personality disorder because I do feel we don't hear about it maybe as often as we hear about the other cluster B personality disorders. So just in general, people with histrionic personality disorder are more excitable, emotional, and they really behave in a colorful, dramatic fashion. And along with this like flamboyant behavior, there's also an inability to maintain deep, long-lasting attachment. So their relationships and attachments tend to be emotionally superficial. This disorder is diagnosed more frequently in women than men. And when you're interviewing somebody with histrionic personality disorder, they will usually be cooperative. They'll be very eager to tell you their history, but they're going to have conversation that's punctuated by a lot of dramatic gestures, very colorful language. If they might show feelings, but if you pressure them to acknowledge certain feelings like anger or sadness, they may respond like very surprised. I'm not indignant or even denial. So they'll really act like they don't know what those feelings are, pretend like they're not having them. They really do have a lot of attention-seeking behavior, and they can really exaggerate their thoughts and feelings and make themselves or other things or people sound like really more important than they are. They can have like temper tantrums, cry very easily, and really be accusatory if they're not the center of attention. And it's really important for professionals to realize that these patients can be very like seductive, even though their behavior may be more like flirtatious and overtly like sexually aggressive. But interestingly, even though they're very flirtatious, they might have sexual dysfunction. So the women may have anorgasmia and the men impotence. So their need for reassurance is endless, and they may act out on sexual impulses just to reassure themselves that they're still attractive. Again, their relationships tend to be very superficial because these people can come across as very vain, self-absorbed, fickle, but their strong dependence can actually make them very trusting and gullible. Now, why does this personality disorder come about? So y'all bear with me now. So like a Freudian interpretation of personality traits are basically associated to a person being fixed at a stage of psychosocial development. So in Freudian theory, there's oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages of development. So for example, when we say people are anal, right, those are usually people who are like stubborn, stingy, frugal, but highly conscientious, right? And we would say this all relates back to struggles over toilet training during the anal period of development, whereas an oral period of development usually occurs when children, right, are relying on others for food. So patients who don't have their needs met in this phase can become very passive and dependent. And I'm really hoping y'all are bearing with me now because that's like a very quick run through of that theory of development. And then object relations is another theory of development where we can try to explain the behavior of personality disorder. So in object relations, we are attached, right, to our parent or caregiver. And then we basically internalize as children certain traits of our parent or significant person that's raising us, right? And those traits, that internal presence, which we call the object, we perceive it as an object rather than actual ourselves, right? So the traits of my parent, that's like the object I'm attached to, if that makes sense. So traits of the parent or external object incorporates into the self of the child, and now they own those traits, right? The internal self-representation and objects are really vital to development of your personality. Like another theory would say that personality disorders are largely determined by like defense mechanisms that people have. And I think it's important to recognize that defense mechanisms, they're unconscious. So even though to the person maybe outside looking in, it can look very obvious why people are behaving in a certain way, but to the individual themselves is unconscious. So major defense mechanisms in histrionic personality disorder are repression and disassociation. So repression would be like unconscious forgetting of ideas or feelings, impulses that are unacceptable to the person. Whereas disassociation is really like a separation of consciousness. I'm going to give a couple examples. So in derealization, the environment itself feels strange or unreal, or people can have a sense of feelings of a changed reality. And again, it's important to recognize that people with histrionic personality disorder aren't really aware of their true feelings, and they can't really explain their motivations. And if they get really stressed, their ability to understand reality can become impaired. And some people often have a challenge differentiating histrionic personality disorder from borderline personality disorder. And of course, people can have both of these personality disorders at the same time, but in borderline personality disorder, for example, you're going to tend to see the repeated attempts of self-harm. They can have the brief psychotic episodes can be more likely, and the identity diffusion. So people who have borderline personality disorder tend to have those challenges or shifts in like their identity, like their who they see themselves to be, whether that can be related to like sexual identity, personalities. You might see them be like emo, or they may kind of go over to this whole other identity. So I know that's a quick run through, but I did want to provide just a bit more information about histrionic personality disorder. Although their drama and dramatic presentation can be irritating, it can make it hard for them to connect to other people. But again, it's unconscious, right? Their defense mechanisms, and they really may not have any sense that that's how they're functioning. And so it can be a very impairing personality disorder, because to get their needs met, right, they're very dramatic and over the top, but then the people they do tend to connect to, again, is very superficial. But that need, that desire, that dependence on being validated by those superficial connections, again, can make them very vulnerable to kind of being taken advantage of, right, because they just have to be involved with someone else to feel kind of whole and accepted. So they can end up in some not so great situations. So I hope that information is helpful about histrionic personality disorder.